Hey, this is Jói Sigurdsson, founder of CrankWheel, welcoming you all to our third in a series of podcasts where we interview CrankWheel users about their business and about how they use screen sharing. Today we have with us Rick Olson, our first solo business owner on the podcast. Welcome, Rick.
Greetings, thank you.
It's great to have you on. So I remember when we first got to chatting by email, we were sharing some horror stories about, the cold winters in Minnesota versus the winter in Iceland. So, to continue that tradition, at least the one more time, what's the weather like right now in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, we are unseasonably warm right now. We are hovering in the 50 degrees, which is unheard of going into December here in Minnesota, just south of
Wow,
the Canadian border.
that's amazing. So your 50 degrees is a fair bit. That's actually pretty warm, isn't it?
It is.
That's it's above freezing. It's above freezing at least.
It is above freezing. I was actually mowing my grass, trying to pull up all the leaves from the tree just last week.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm thankfully done with mowing grass and raking leaves. It's about -7 over here. It's actually been some of the coldest. Well, pretty cold for this time of year. It's about 19 degrees Fahrenheit.
So you have our cold weather.
Yeah, exactly. We switched. So very good. So Rick, you told me that by trade you're a retail consultant. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. So my history, I spent about 25 years with a discount retailer here in the U.S., doing everything from store management to merchandising, crisis management. I started a business continuity program for merchandising. It's the doom and gloom. What happens if? And then throughout that, I was pulling together experiential marketing, and we were doing pop-up stores, going into high-profile areas, cities, setting up weekend events for brand launching. And then my last role filled into a store of the future, really taken into the innovation. What's going to happen? Why are people going to shop in retail locations 5 years from now? And what it did is it really led into this entire internet marketing and new media passion of mine, going into what's happening on the internet. And this is both for retail as well as just how it's changing business.
Neat. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And so you were at a much larger company, and now you're building your own.
That is correct. Yeah.
Are you focusing on specific parts of that experience that you just described, or are you doing all of that?
It's interesting. So retail itself, in what I did, is building up this entire network of store to merchandising to crisis to future, and then taking this on to the next level for online retail. And what I'm trying to focus in is how our business is focusing on that next evolution. How are they going to be taking care of the customer? So it fits a little bit into that retail consulting side of it, as well as the solopreneur side that we've talked about, and hopefully we'll get into a little bit more of that a little later. But it's how our companies working with the consumer. How can they make it a better experience for them?
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. And you told me that you're sort of you're growing the business right now. What kind of activities are you doing to scale that up?
Yeah, the business that I'm going after is automated messaging. So the site that I have here is automatedmessagingexperience.com. But what I'm trying to go after this here is this chat bot, this AI generation that's coming at us. How many times are we dealing with a phone call? And is it a human? Is it a AI bot that's directing the conversation? And so what I'm trying to do is really take that and learn from that and build a business around that as well, and share this retail background that I have with this future generation coming at us with this customer service automated chatbots. And so that's how I'm using CrankWheel as the tool to help provide this value for my customers. And it's a new technology. It's out there. People have a little bit of knowledge of it, and I think it's almost a scare knowledge that they have, or it's the unknown, and that can be
Hmm.
frightful for people.
So do you find that having like a visual way to show them what you're building, does that help their understanding of the chatbots?
That's exactly what it does.
Hmm.
You can direct them to a site and let them run it themselves. But I think there's always something that somebody wants to see the sausage making. What
Right.
goes in the background to it that gives you this great experience on the front end? And if you can explain that, I think it builds trust. And it's a new tool, and I think that's what people need to understand.
Hmm. Exactly. So what do you think will be? I mean, I know there are already steps happening in AI sort of answering questions using text-based chatbots, but you mentioned, the phone call that might be I think you said directed by an AI, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Not
Yeah.
not not necessarily the AI actually speaking, but a human being told what to do by the AI.
But the research on it is pretty crazy. Right now, when you dial into a customer service number, there is emotional intelligence that they're building into it that can tell if you are a really upset customer. That's calling in to complain. Maybe that'll move you up further in the line to get service sooner, so it builds a little better brand equity for you. Um, but so it goes back to that old school model of you can't always be polite and swallow the anger that you have. But sometimes it's this AI is going to push us into a generation of show your emotions. It'll push you to the front, and that may not always be the case. But I think they
Right,
should be
right,
careful
yeah,
for.
yeah. I was just going to say this will clearly leads to an arms race between AIs that are detecting emotion and AIs that are projecting emotion through your phone call.
Absolutely.
Try to
Frightening
get to the
world we
front of
live
the
in.
line. Well, yeah, it's not, but well, not too bad.
No,
Um,
technology good, technology bad.
mhm, exactly. They're all just tools, right?
That's right. That's right.
So that's very cool. So with your site, automatedmessagingexperience.com, are you do you foresee like adding people, hiring a team, building that kind of company, or are you focusing on sort of continuing as a solopreneur, doing consulting and building, a product for others?
Yeah, right now it's the consulting is the primary. That's the putting shoes on the kid side of things.
Mhm.
But the solopreneur is really learning more about how these tools are being used in retail. So it's a little bit of an experiment for myself, so I can stay on top of what's happening in the trends. So it's going to be a little balance of both. I think the chatbots, the automated messaging, and where it's going to evolve into can really overtake the core retail consulting side. There's a lot of energy around it right now. People are really interested in it.
Mhm.
So we'll see where it goes with building it out. And there's a lot of companies out there that are going heavy into it. Your IBMs, your Facebooks. It's going to be a balance of that. It's a little bit of a learning tool for myself, as well as seeing what the market is showing with it as well.
Mhm. Sounds really interesting, and sort of you're sort of at the forefront of what some of the latest technology is bringing us, and also the changes that we've had in how we use the internet and all these new capabilities that we have.
Yeah, that's. I'm hoping to trying to stay there. A few years back, I went and got my degree, my master's degree in internet marketing and new media. It was an online program because I started researching as I was going through it, and everything I was reading was in books, right? And in internet marketing, by the time I was reading the book, that was 3-4 years old. The business had completely changed, and I think you're spot on when you're saying of this chatbot piece, this messaging is just the forefront of what's going to be coming at us. And so it's continuous learning and seeing what's out there in the market, and I think sharing that with others is an important piece.
Hmm. Yeah, let me segue there on learning what's out there in the market. Do you remember how you first discovered CrankWheel?
I do. Looking for as a solopreneur, you're trying to find all the resources that are available to you to make your life easier. We don't have time. You're probably yourself. You've gone through this as well. You don't have time to do everything from email to calendaring to scheduling to website management to finance, etc. So I look for tools, and your platform was on AppSumo,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I learned about it. Did a quick trial on it, and it fit exactly what I needed.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, a lot of people have discovered us through AppSumo, and a lot of people also discover us on the Chrome Web Store. Those are sort of recently our top two sources of traffic, which makes doing all the other kind of marketing feel a little bit pointless, but it's not. Um,
Branding is
but
branding.
yeah, exactly. Branding is branding. Now you mentioned that you've been using CrankWheel to sort of show your customers what you're doing with the chatbots and explain how the sausage is made and so forth. Is that the main way you use it for your business, or are there other ways you use it as well?
Yeah, right now there's two different ways. You mentioned the first one there is when I have a warm lead that's interested in it, I can set up a quick chat with CrankWheel and really share things happening. Second one is through networking events. When I go physically meet with somebody and they want to learn more about it, I can schedule a meeting with it right there, send it the email, so it feeds it to me later. It's a good reminder tool, and it gets it on their calendar as well. And then the third piece
Right.
is just CrankWheel. It's almost sharing what I'm working on with other partners that are working on similar tools, similar chats. Um,
Oh, I see. So
yeah,
sort of like a collaboration or a brainstorm, sort of looking at what you're doing together and
and that's exactly it.
exchanging ideas.
That's
Yeah,
exactly it.
yeah. Yeah, we actually find, and this was a use case that surprised us, but we actually find that, or that we didn't foresee, but we find that a lot of professionals use CrankWheel just to collaborate with either other professionals, coders, like programmers do that quite a bit. You know, they show other programmers their screen. We're actually lazy enough at the office that we, rather than stand up and walk over to the other guy, we'll share the screen with CrankWheel and shout
Absolutely.
across the room. And then we find that folks like accountants and lawyers, they often use CrankWheel to review documents or review books and stuff like that with their clients.
Interesting
So
model. I'll have to try that
so
one next.
yeah. So that sounds a little familiar, like doing that kind of collaboration with your peer group. Um, so neat. So you mentioned going to trade shows. Tell me about that and other ways you find customers in your line of business.
Yeah, it's boy. The first one, we talked about these networking events and trade shows. Getting out there and just having the conversation in the hallways, between booths, at dinner, during drinks. You start the relationship conversation first. And as people understand it and want to learn more about it, right then might not be the time to hit them with the product. So it's a setting it up for future. And so if I can go in through the mobile side of it or go in through the back end on the website, I can set everything up for them right there. So it's there when they wake up in the morning for their email or when they grab it later when they're at their desk. So that's one way.
Exactly.
Uh,
Hmm.
Another way that I'm trying this is warm calls. Nobody likes to really go out there and do a cold call. It's just not a fun process. So the warm side of it is once I receive direct mail from a particular niche, and right now I'm looking at the attorneys. My fiance got in a car accident, a little fender bender, and everything's fine and she's safe. What it is,
Good.
it generated this huge, massive direct mailing to our house from every attorney that wants to do something, making sure people are safe and lawsuits, et cetera, and chasing.
Hmm.
So what I started doing is grabbing their direct materials, going onto their website to see what their site looks like, offering a free web presence, a free website audit for them. It gets a warm call going, and then you can also add into this chatbot messaging, looking at what they're paying on a direct mailing side of it and buying the list. A chatbot on a monthly basis is a far much more beneficial or positive ROI for them. And it's easy to prove it. You can get their numbers of what they're spending on direct mail. You know how much it is for a development cost. Having the conversation with them, they also get some free SEO out of the deal. Um, and then it can lead into the conversation of adding a bot onto it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. So they're marketing to you, and you're calling them back, but about something else.
That's right. I'll let them start the conversation with me first.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the nice, good tactics in the book, actually. I think.
That's it.
Sure, somebody's written about that at some point. But what about you? Do you do any types of marketing? Email, online ads, anything like that?
Right now, I've tried some Facebook ads. Didn't get much benefit from it. I just need to retool who I'm speaking to. Through my website. Just doing the SEO audit to that right now. We're retooling it, so it's offline today. Hopefully, get that back up here within the week with keyword stuffed and making sure it's valuable for people. I think that's how I'm really generating my marketing side of it.
Right. I in addition to CrankWheel, I run a website called startupresources.io, where it's primarily about building a mailing list and a relationship with folks that are interested in building startups and free tools for startups and things like that. And just putting it out there that building a mailing list around what you're doing would make a lot of sense. You're discovering all these new things about chatbots and AI and stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested.
That is really, what is the website again for that one?
My website, it's startupresources.io. That's just an example. I'm not talking about chatbots in particular there. Just more like various tools for startups. And then of course we have the mailing list for CrankWheel, where this podcast goes out to and everything. And I just find that building an audience that you're talking to regularly, and especially about something that's really fairly niche, is a great way to market product services.
No, that's fantastic. I think you hit on something right there. Now that we're having this conversation, and we've previously as well, and your product itself, there's a lot of trust built up. And I think this is, having the startup resources is a great tool for me now that I trust, that I'm going to go and grab some content from yourself as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Exactly. I asked about email marketing because we've recently launched this ability. You mentioned instant demos where you can do the lead capture and sort of give them a call back right away, or they can schedule a meeting. And we've recently added the ability to put a link like that right into your email, whether it's like a personal email or part of a newsletter or part of some kind of automated campaign. So I wanted to mention that in the context of email marketing. Do you think that's something you might be able to use as a solo owner?
Extremely. I think you just hit, we talked about earlier of time. How do you make it easier and grab as many resources as you possibly can to make it easier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, speaking of features, do you have any feature requests in CrankWheel that would be top of your list?
Yeah. What I'll say is the instant demo that's out there now with the plugin that's been dropped out in WordPress, extremely helpful. Easy to use, easy to set up. You get the email alerts. The agent handles the request. The one piece that I would love to see is a click immediate contact button, some way to connect my agent with, or agent me, with the client immediately. So.
Right. Yeah. Do you mean so they would be they are in their browser on your website or in an email, they're asking for a demo, and do you mean you would speak to them through the browser like we're doing now when we're recording this podcast?
Yeah, that would,
like a voice over IP kind of thing?
I would, yes. I think I spend most of my time sitting in front of the computer, so that would be extremely helpful.
Yep. Yeah. Too many of us do. I need to hit the gym too. So okay. Yeah. That's very much on our roadmap. It's a feature we think would be really useful. We do have some baby steps towards it. So right now, if somebody is asking for a demo and they've entered their phone number, it used to be you would have to type that phone number into your office phone or your smartphone to make that phone call. And you can still do that, but now if you have a soft phone on your PC, like I use something called Bria 4, then you can just click the phone number and it opens up the soft phone, makes the phone call right away. and it's pretty convenient, but it's not what you're asking for. Yeah, that's definitely something we're taking into consideration, trying to build that.
That's great.
One of the reasons we haven't done it so far is that we try with CrankWheel to be completely compatible with pretty much every browser that's out there, and voice over IP in the browser without requiring a download is something that's still pretty far from being ubiquitous across, especially on mobiles, but really in even for desktop users. So that's one of the reasons.
There's always a roadblock, isn't there?
Well, we can do it, and we've been investigating how best to do it. It's just a question of making the user experience flow as seamlessly as possible, and not setting expectations that we can't meet. Like if somebody's on the webpage and we promise them that they'll get a phone call right there in the browser, we'd better not do that unless we actually can deliver on that.
No, that's very true.
So yeah. So there's things like that, but that's a good feature request, and one that we hear quite a lot. So we're definitely working on that.
That's super. I think that's what makes your product so great. Is it's going back to when I signed up for it here. There's always been this level of trying to gather input from your customer, from myself, and I'm sure that you do that with others as well. And that's how you make something better. So I really hats off to you and your team for doing that as well.
Well, thanks a lot, Rick. Thanks. I appreciate that. We definitely do try to listen to our customers and engage in conversations with them. And I'd invite anyone, if you have ideas, anything you want to discuss, just email us at support@crankwheel.com, or you can email me directly, Jói@crankwheel.com. Just to initiate the conversation. We'll be happy to have that talk. Okay, so Rick, you have a potentially quite large audience listening, to the podcast. We have about 10,000 people on our mailing list and social media. So, is there anything you'd like to leave them with? A word of wisdom, or maybe just a call to action?
Yeah, I'd say for words of wisdom, what I've learned over all these years in retail, everything changes quickly, and if you don't change with it or learn about what's coming at you, you'll become legacy. And I think what we've seen in retail is legacy disappears. The consumers will pick something different. So always looking for that next thing, not to be innovative and off the edge, but really to find value and give that to your consumers, because that'll keep you relevant.
Makes total sense. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you joining me here on this third CrankWheel podcast. It's been really great speaking with you and getting some insight into chatbots and how you're building your business. So thank you very much for being our first solo owner on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thanks for interview.
Thanks.